To the last Arthopolis of the season. It is art hopping on Wednesdays, first Wednesday of every month. Tonight is the first time that we organize an exhibit for Harriet Hill-Wooley alumni.
This project started over 2 years ago when a very Irish name popped up on my computer screen, Maureen O'Leary. And as many of you know, I have Irish roots myself, and it was wonderful to meet Maureen and to talk about this project, and it's evolved so much since the very beginning in January 2016.
Donc je vais traduire, donc c'est un projet de la mafia irlandaise.
So Tally's been working with us for 1 year now, and she has done an absolutely incredible job selecting this work. There's also a number of Woolly scholars that I would like to mention who have helped us out, like Isaac Howell and Taylor Smith, who repainted the gallery, who helped us hang the show. Jennifer Ryland, Kelly Reedy, who created this beautiful piece on the floor in front of her video art.
You know, this is a community of people that are in time related, but we don't know each other even though we've had the same studios through time. And I thought this is a history that hasn't been written, and maybe it's time to write its first draft. So that's how I came to contact these lovely women with whom I've been had the honor to collaborate.
As a curator, for me, the most important thing is that the works speak to each other in the space. So my goal was trying to choose works that could dialogue with each other and awaken the space.
Because even though we didn't know each other at the time we held the fellowships, that we actually form a lineage of artists who developed at a really critical time in the same studios, in the same amazing building.
And I have just beautiful memories of, I remember we had a big dinner in my atelier once, and it was a wonderful experience. I just remembered meeting so many wonderful artists and seeing so many beautiful concerts that really touched me. And I was fascinated by the idea that we could get to know each other through our artwork and through an exhibit where our artwork would dialogue with one another.
And I thought it's, in a sense, kind of the first draft of the history of this place, the first draft of what its artistic legacy is. And so I decided to reach out to the Fondation, to the current directors, and to Noémie.
We really loved the project and had this desire also to find out more about Harriet Hill-Wooley, because at the time I had just been working here for maybe 6 months, and I knew nothing about Harriet Hill-Wooley. And all of the Fondation team loved the idea, and so we started this project maybe 2.5 years ago at this point.
We are very happy to have something specifically celebrating the history of the artists on the 5th floor that were sponsored by Harriet Hill-Wooley's very generous idea to give a large chunk of her fortune to the Fondation des États-Unis to make this scholarship possible.
A few years ago, I had a dream, and I was in the Louvre, and I visited a certain room and began to draw on a drawing, which normally you don't do in a museum. And when I woke up, I realized it was a small drawing of Medusa, and that started about a 10-year process. And this film is about the Medusa and 3 generations of women and the transformation that happens. I also did a floor installation for this, and it's also based on Medusa and the goddess Kali, who is an Indian goddess of creation and destruction, and it's about transformation. And I guess, in a way, this foundation transformed everyone who comes to the door, whether you're an artist, a musician, or a student. So, kind of a homage to what I experienced, among other things.
And how do you make action occur on that surface? And if you think about seeing something in motion, what you see is it and what's behind it simultaneously. And by making these images quasi-transparent, I can capture that. Also, by using multiple perspectives and different light sources, you end up creating a very pulsating, multi-active surface, which I find very interesting.
Right, the paintings that I have in the show are a diptych. I don't title my work, but I sometimes casually refer to this painting as my sky. Trees are an extremely significant thread through my work. There's an incredibly rich blue in the sky. I love to look at the cropped trees that are so characteristic of France and certainly of Paris in the winter, when you can see the way their branches have grown into these interesting sculptural forms. They capture wound and also regrowth. They're tough, but they're also injured. And I can't look at that enough. I love those trees. And so that was a memory from here that was very important to me. And I feel that there may be a little bit of an underlying connection between this particular piece of bare trees coming into the show and then this really fond memory that I have of looking at the trees that one can see almost everywhere in the parks in Paris.
It was here that I started to introduce into my work pieces that I found, vestiges of World War I and World War II, and it's something that has now dominated my work. So it's really thanks to my time here that I really found the fil rouge of my work.
So when we started talking about this show, I immediately wanted to return to the theme of World War I. That we're in 2018, the centennial of the end of World War I. So I wanted to make a piece that commented the gender relations during World War I and how the relationship between men and women changed.
I've been living here for 3 years now. I have the Woolly Scholar for the 2017-2018 year. I'm working on a project doing a bunch of collaborations with scientists, studying microscopic and aerial images of destruction of nature.
One funny thing that happened to organize this exhibit is that we included a piece that we love by Micah Wood. It's framed with a three-piece triangle. They were welded together by Micah when he was here in the house. And when we tried to move it, the 3 pieces came apart. And so, of course, we tried to weld it back ourselves, but it just didn't work. It kept falling apart. And so I had the idea of taking it to an auto shop, and in 2 minutes they made it better than it ever was.
I'm a fine art printmaker. I do a lot of mixed media, digital work, and mixed with etching and drawing. I also work some three-dimensionally. I taught printmaking at Indiana University and wound up being the director of the program until I retired in 2013. And now I have my own studio called Chiaroscuro Pressing Studio, also in Bloomington, Indiana.
For me, it was a life-changing event, and I mean that quite seriously, because I decided it's more interesting for me for a lot of reasons, a lot of them practical, meaning I was doing very large paintings, and to ship them back to the States would have been difficult. So I decided perhaps I should study something in France that didn't really exist on a very professional level in the US, and that was lithography. When I went back to the States, I was one of the few people who knew this stuff and ended up getting a job at the Pratt Graphics Center. And then from that grew all these invitations to various universities to lecture, and from that grew a professorship which I held for then 37 years at the State University of New York at Purchase College, and I'm eternally grateful.
In general, I came here right after finishing my graduate studies, and I think it's just like an amazing opportunity to be able to come and spend just like a whole year kind of unpacking everything that I studied, continuing my research without having to work full time, having like my own studio to kind of like keep painting. I think it's very hard to find a space as big as the one at FEU for the price that I'm paying. So I think in general, it's just this whole package has been like a great experience, I think. Yeah.
Because it was 3 years of idyllic life where all I had to do was paint and hang out with musicians and painters and other artists. And even I had this Woolley grant, which was at the time enough to get by, but just enough to get by. The cultural activities, we didn't hardly need to leave the Cité Universitaire. I also remember the first day I arrived here coming from Nice, where I had gone to art school for a year. I walked up to the terrace on top of the Fondation, and I looked out over the rooftops, and I said to myself, Bowen, you're going to make it or die trying in this city. This is where I'm staying, and I'm still here.
It was extremely touching to actually see the alumni who had been Heritage Woolley in the 80s, in the 70s, coming and see their room and react to the way things were and the way they lived there. And you could feel the deep attachment they had for the time they lived and they spent at the Fondation and in their studios. And most of the time, one of the feedbacks we have is that it was a time of liberty. And I think that's a wonderful American and French thing to experience at the Fondation.